Hello to everyone watching, and thank you for joining our interview series here at Formula Careers. We're aiming to provide helpful information for you to access the career path you want in motorsport. Today's interviewee is Gabriel Elias. Gabriel was a design engineer at Mercedes-AMG Formula One team for many years and has recently set up his own motorsport consultancy business, GME Concepts. Hi Gabriel, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Very well. Yeah.
Good. So let's start off with what you do now. So sort of what is your role and what are your responsibilities in that role?
I guess I have a bunch of hats and roles now. I'm a senior design engineer for an up and coming electric vehicle company. And then besides that, I'm also a director of a motorsport consultancy here in the US called GME Concepts, which kind of been operating off and on for a couple of years. And now I'm getting quite a bit of traction on some US-based motorsport projects, some with Formula One, some outside of it. So.
And what does a working week look like for you?
Oh, that's a difficult one. Right now, a lot of it is, centered around remote design work, meetings, Zoom stuff, just like everyone else at this moment. And then, there's some informal in-person meetings. I've been to a couple of race shops around here to do some have some chats and look at some projects that people are working on. But yeah, just like most people at the moment now, it's all either CAD based or computer based stuff that's taking up most of my time. So yeah, no different than the typical engineer, I would say.
And what's the best thing about your job?
Right now, the flexibility has been quite nice. I'm sitting here on Miami Beach, and I'm able to be pretty effective in my new role with this EV startup, which is great. And then also, just meet with people around the world with regards to motorsport, projects that they're working on in Formula One, young drivers, a lot of crazy stuff. So it's been a fun transition back to the US here, in tough times, I would say.
So when did you transition back to the US?
Well, I left Mercedes September of 2020, so just a couple months ago, and had to ship everything over. Got a big container, put a car in there, two cars and a bunch of other stuff, and put that on a boat to come back here to the US. And then I started working here, I would say in earnest, probably mid-October. And it's been pretty crazy ever since, through the Christmas break and now here into the new year. So tons of work and tons of inquiries, I guess, into various projects, things all over the place. So yeah, it's been a busy one. Sorry about the loud noise outside.
It's okay. It's not really coming through, so it's fine.
Okay.
It snowed here yesterday, so I'm a bit jealous that you're somewhere nice and warm. So now today we're going to go back to the beginning. So what did you study at school and then at sort of college and university?
Well, yeah. So in the US, school, as in, I guess, high school or, primary, secondary school is pretty much basic. So you don't have the same thing in the UK where you can kind of like start to specialize as you get farther down into your high school career. So yeah, typical high school, for me, I was always very interested in cars, motorsport, probably Formula One from the age of 9 or 10. I was absolutely crazy about it. And then it kind of became apparent that my way into motorsport was going to be the technical route. And I took that as a reason to go study mechanical engineering at university. I went to the University of Miami for undergraduate here, which is a nice school, not really well known for its engineering, but it was a school I wanted to go to, and it was local to me. It worked out well. My first job out of university was with Honda R&D Americas, where as an engine designer, I had to move to Ohio for a couple of years, and that was a fun first job where I first learned the fundamentals of design engineering, how to design parts for a car, what goes into the manufacturing process, the drawing process, what's CAD, what's tolerancing, dimensioning, how to design for service, manufacturability, all those kinds of things. So it was a really good kind of like palate cleanser, so to speak, into the rest of my motorsport career. In parallel to that, I was volunteering for race teams in the Ohio area to get my hands on a open wheel car. So I always had racing in the back of my head as like this was going to be my end goal, but wasn't sure how I was going to get there. And from there, I saw that Honda was re-entering Formula One. This was about 2013 as an engine designer. Sorry, as an engine manufacturer. They were going to design and manufacture the engines for McLaren a couple years later. And I said I really wanted to work on this project to my boss, and he said no, I wasn't experienced enough. So I said, okay, I quit, and I'm going to try my hand at getting to Formula One before you think I can. And that set me off with a couple suitcases, moving to the UK to get a master's at Oxford Brookes, and then pursue, career in Formula One.
So you mentioned that you did some volunteering with some racing teams, but did you do any other extracurriculars or work experience whilst you were studying?
No, actually, that's a good point. So an undergraduate Formula student, or Formula SAE as it's known in the US, is not I would say as widespread as it is in the UK or in Europe, where it seems to be almost a mainstay at most universities. My school didn't have any programs like that. So my extracurricular was wrenching on my own car. I had a car project when I was 16. Well, I bought it when I was 17. I had it all the way through university, the first time at university, and swapping motors and doing, changing different parts all over it. That was my extracurricular, I would say, to get the hands-on experience that I needed to be more effective in the automotive space. So it just started with a wrench in hand and a lot of grease and all that kind of fun stuff, But the racetrack was really important. My early visits to the racetrack, and actually going there for a race weekend and seeing an open wheel car and taking it apart and looking at what a sequential transmission looks like and all these kinds of things, you start to gain an appreciation for what a real race car looks like. And the truth of the matter is they're not very far off from the main components that you see on a Formula One car today. So it was a very good kind of baseline for my knowledge, as I was going forward.
You're saying lots of engineering words that I don't understand, but I'm sure those that are watching will. I'm just not an engineering student. Now, my favorite question, because everyone answers differently. What did you want to be when you grew up?
When I was young, I wanted to be a race car driver. And that was, most kids start off with that kind of a dream. And I realized that it's a very cost prohibitive dream, and I wasn't prepared for, or I don't think my family was prepared to put me through, all the different levels of racing to get me to my goal. So yeah, at an early age, it came to be where I just wanted to design race cars. It was probably my earliest dream when I was a kid, was I wanted to do that. And it's very few people I know, I'm sure you know as well, that ever really accomplished their childhood dreams. So I kind of feel very grateful to have gone to the top and done that. This is something I set out to do when I barely even knew what a car was, and I was just like, I'm going to design cars someday. And, sure, it happened, so maybe because of me kind of being so steadfast in that approach, it, ended up being the case. So.
I mean, I mentioned it in an earlier episode, but my childhood dream was to be a fairy. So you're definitely doing better than me on that front.
Very nice. You still got time. Don't worry.
Well, yeah, you never know. So you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but we're going to fill in some of the middle now. So your career path, so you did an undergrad, then you had a job, and then you went to do a master's, and then you went into F1. Can you just sort of make that a little bit clearer for us, like how that progressed for you?
Sure, absolutely. So I would say the goal for me when I was in university was always to get to F1. Now the path was a bit convoluted, but the goal was the same. So I basically set out in my head as soon as I graduated from undergrad that I was going to take let's say 3 to 5 years in order to achieve said goal. And that took me through some logical steps. So when I was first looking for my first job, I could have worked at the power company as an engineer, or I could have worked at a train company, but I said, no, I need to go to an automotive manufacturer because this would be setting me up with experiences that I know would transition into motorsport if I wanted to take it. So that kind of narrowed down my path. So the Honda was just a company that I admired as a kid. I knew a lot about their racing heritage, and I said, well, this is a very cool job. I like engines. They want someone to design engines, so this sounds great. So I took that first position and really learned the ropes. Obviously, the first year was really tough on me to be able to kind of learn how to be a professional, note taking, being punctual, learning the nuances of design and things that unfortunately I wasn't really prepared well for from my university. Some universities are very good at preparing students to be engineers, and some kind of just give you the fundamental basics, which I think more American universities give you more of the fundamentals rather than the practical knowledge or the use case knowledge, which I saw in a lot of European universities. So there's a bit of a difference there. So maybe I was on the back foot at the start, but I found Honda as a good way to build towards the experience I needed. When I realized Honda wasn't going to get me to Formula One directly, I started looking for direct paths, and that was through studying further in the UK with Oxford Brookes. And I talked to many former alums that similarly were from the US or Canada, and they let me know, they reassured me that like, this is your best shot. If you want to do this, you got to go here. So that set me off on my next portion of my journey, which was a master's at Oxford Brookes. I guess it was the 2013 to 2014 school year. And that program was good. I think I had a lot of the knowledge that was probably being taught to us at the time because I had already a professional experience. I was working in the auto industry at the time. So I was maybe had a bit of a leg up on a lot of the other students. And but the good thing is it offers quite a nice, not a fraternity, but like a networking. It offers you a ton of networking possibilities with all the F1 teams and all of the suppliers within the Motorsport Valley, which is surrounding Oxford. So it was being in the right place. That's what it gave me. And from there, I was applying to every single team, and just like many Americans and other non-EU nationals that apply for Formula One teams, I was getting rejected quite a bit because of visa-related issues. And I came across a job with Mercedes, which not only fit my previous experience, but with what I did at Honda, but then also kind of offered a very unique insight in something that I an area of vehicle design that I really wanted to get into, which is this future car concept group. And stars aligned. I prepared like hell for this interview, and I ended up getting the job. So that is my path to Formula One. From there, it was a lot of zigzags and circles and crazy stuff, once I got into the doors, I guess.
So now we have the sort of what I like to think of as the difficult questions. So what has been your biggest challenge, and how did you overcome that challenge?
Biggest challenge, I'm trying to think. Would you say I had a couple. I would say getting the job in Formula One was a massive challenge. That was probably the most difficult thing I've ever had to do. Preparing for that. And when you really look at the path I laid out to you, that was over a 4 or 5 year span of me trying to position everything in my life to be able to achieve this goal. So it wasn't overnight. Within Formula One, I would say I had some challenges with my work posts where I had a job that I was in kind of disappeared, so to speak, and it required me to realign my experiences in order to find another position on the team, for a longer term position. And I was successful in doing that. So the one thing I learned from that challenge was to make sure I was flexible and always learning. So I couldn't just come into Formula One and say, oh, I only do this job. I needed to be cognizant enough of the vehicle as a whole and say, hey, look, if I'm not working in powertrain, what else could I do, or what else interests me? And then start looking into the background and laying the groundwork for being able to move to a different role within the team. And that did come up, and I was able to kind of uh, be successful in that transition. I would say another challenge of mine was proving your worth within a Formula One team. I found that Formula One teams in general are very risk averse. They don't want to take on unknown quantities. If I come from the US, I might as well be an alien from Mars. They don't have any background associated with me, my work ethic. They weren't talking to Honda and seeing how good I was or how bad I was. To me, I was just another graduate that came through the door. So there's a lot of reluctancy from, I would say, some of the older school managers to maybe not give you, a difficult project, or maybe not expose you to too much for fear of failure. We don't want to have a car failure. So it took a couple years for me to really gain, I would say, the trust of some of the people within the design office. And once I did, I was contributing, I would say, at a high rate, and proving a lot of people right, which was good. I was really happy. I had quite a few supporters within the office. But that first, to be able to kind of push through that block, I guess, at the start of my career was a difficult one. But eventually I became, established within the team, and had a permanent position that I was relatively good at. So it kind of, it worked out in the end. But yeah, that was a difficult one to start with.
So conversely, what's your proudest moment then?
I would say the proudest thing would probably have to do with some of my designs. The 2018 Rad Ducks I did, I thought were they were quite novel. We did a lot of things on that car, and I was given a lot of directive from our chief designer to really change the way that these parts are designed and built. And it was pretty aggressive change points. And I took it upon myself to say, okay, we're going to hit all these targets, and I brought something to my department, and then our chief designer and chief engineer, that was a huge step, I think, in the design of that portion of the vehicle that had been the same on most F1 cars for, let's say, 5 to 7 years prior. So that was a big one for me. Everything was lighter, stronger, more efficient, all these kinds of targets that you hear in Formula One. And once I was able to kind of achieve that, to me, that was like my magnum opus within Formula One, where I was like, yeah, this was my favorite part that I ever worked on. 2017, I did a lot of really cool projects where I worked on the concept of the 2017 car, and then I went into designing the side pod radiators, which were then used on the car too. So it was a really interesting transition from literally like the cradle all the way to the grave, so to speak, to the end of the season of this car, from white page all the way to parts on the car. So, but yeah, those 2 years were really fun projects, difficult ones, but ones where I was just super rewarded. I felt super rewarded personally after completing them. And obviously, we won world championships, so it's just icing on the cake there.
So if you could pick one thing that was sort of a catalyst that got you where you are now, what would it be? What would be that one thing that you did that got you where you are now?
Does this catalyst, like, I'm trying to think how I could word this. There's probably a couple things. It wasn't just one thing for sure. My earliest memories of Formula One are probably what sparked my interest in it. And I tell a lot of people that I was like a real big IndyCar fan, and IndyCar had a lot of really good drivers in the mid 90s. When I was young, I was a little tight. And one of them was Jacques Villeneuve, who's Canadian. He won the Indy 500. And the next year, Jacques Villeneuve went to Williams Formula One. It was his transition to F1. And I liked him so much as a driver that I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to start watching Formula One. So this was like that earliest moment where I was like, I'm going to pay attention to this other form of racing that, is in Europe, and stay up in the middle of the night to watch these races and stuff. And so I kind of look at some of those early memories of the very, the years of Formula One that most fans still laud as being like amazing, and these crazy historical battles and stuff. Those were the years that kind of like sparked my interest in the sport and brought me in, kind of sucked me in for good. And led to me eventually working in it. So, yeah.
And lots of people, when I've been doing these interviews, they mention soft skills as something that's really important that often get overlooked when you're doing your studies. So how can people develop those soft skills?
Do you have a definition for what people would call as soft skills? And I can tell you exactly
like
how.
teamwork, sort of interpersonal communication, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Good stuff. Yes, very important. I would say that the typical engineer's biggest deficiency is communication. That most engineers are absolutely horrible at it. If you go through your uni, you probably look around and you just don't see a lot of fraternizing and, chatty people, partying, those kinds of things. So knowing how to effectively communicate to someone face to face is very important. Maybe as an American, it's easier for me, where I can just walk up to someone and just chat. I know in Britain, they found me to be kind of abrasive at times with my ability to just like circumvent all social norms and just like walk up to the person I want to speak to. So that was a difficult one, but it benefited me tremendously because I was able to start having conversations with people that most others wouldn't dare to have conversations with. And I never understood why someone should just be limited based off of a, standoffish attitude that someone might portray. So being able to communicate effectively is huge. Be sociable. Those kinds of things were huge for me. One I talked about earlier is note taking. Just something like you don't realize that you need to do it, but I was in a position early in my career where I wasn't taking notes all the time, and I saw how detrimental it was. Where my boss would ask me a question and be like, "Oh, I don't remember what I told you yesterday about this." Like being able to look at a notepad and say, "These are the 5 things I need to do. This is my list." I mark them off the list. You leave no stone unturned. You're not forgetting anything. And then when it comes time to review your performance with whoever your superior is, you can go to them really effectively and say, "Look, I can go back to this day and say, on this day, we talked about these 4 things. I did these 4 things. This is what you asked. We confirmed it." That kind of stuff is invaluable. I can't stress it enough how important that was for me to kind of go from being okay at what I was doing to being effective, which is that's what you want in Formula One. In Formula One, they want every engineer to pull their own weight and be at a certain level, like a really high standard of operating. And you need all those small little skills. So communication, note taking, and then determination is probably just like, it's not a soft skill, but it's just something that I think is absolutely important. People are gonna give you a hard time. It's gonna be tough. You're gonna be working on weekends in the middle of the night, and you just have to be able to kind of shrug off the tough times and keep going, because that's how you get to greatness, I guess.
So we've started talking about it with the soft skills, and it's quite an open-ended question, but what advice would you give to young people wanting to work in motorsport?
Yeah, it's a good one. Usually if you want to get into motorsport, it's a passion-based decision, and make sure that that's the case. Make sure you're not doing it for some other reason. I got into Formula One to be in F1, not to make money. Because the truth of the matter is 90% of them won't make that much money in F1. It's just not the place to do it. But that didn't stop me from doing it, obviously, for a long time. So, you have to be passionate about what you're doing, and you have to be very resilient, and you have to just keep pushing. And the one thing that I see a lot of young people now that contact me about how to get into F1 and, can I miracle them essentially? And I can't. It's not as easy as just flipping a switch or snapping your finger. It doesn't work like that. So having having the understanding that you need to be continually working towards your goal, and it might take you 6 months or it might take you 6 years, but if you keep working at it, you will get there. I'm proof of that. So yeah, I would say just like, sheer determination is probably just that thing that I want to see more people exhibit.
And obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic at the moment. So what would you say to students that are worried about opportunities not being there because of the pandemic?
It's a good point. It's a valid concern. And I think that Formula One, I'm just speaking because they're the biggest portion of motorsport, is probably going to go through a bit of a transition over the next couple of years. There will be cost cutting, there might be job cutting, and downsizing, and we might see it. But what is going to actually happen is, I think the grid not only will expand, but the division of power, and that really comes from your workers, your personnel, will start to get spread across the grid. And so what that's going to do is start offering more opportunities at some smaller teams that maybe didn't have a budget or didn't have the space to, as they start to expand and grow up. So if you're good, there's always going to be a spot for you. So I think that you should never be worried about the financial concerns of the world economy and all these kinds of things in the pandemic. You should always just keep going towards your goal. It might delay it slightly, but your goal will still be achievable.
And finally, have you got anything else that you'd like to add?
No, obviously, the things I want to say to all the students that are going to be watching this, or young people that want to get into F1, is, thanks so much for always contacting me. I'm happy that I've been an inspiration for a lot of people and actually pushed people onto their careers. I will say that, you just have to kind of keep pushing, and this isn't an easy thing to do, but once you achieve it, you will be so handsomely rewarded, I guess you could say, for all your hard work. So, for all those out there that are really wanting to make this happen, you can absolutely do it. And I hope you just keep on the path. Don't give up so easily. I know that's a kind of a calling card of a lot of young people these days, is, oh, it didn't work, that's it. This is not a very easy thing to do, and you should kind of have to embrace the tough times to get to the grid, to get to the top. So I hope that kind of spurs on a bit of determination from some young people here to keep at it, from wherever you come from.
That's a really nice sentiment to end on. So thank you for joining us, and thank you everyone for watching. If you do have any suggestions or requests for people for us to interview, please let me know at Izzie Holman. That's IZZIEHOLMAN on all social media, and I'm on LinkedIn too. Until next time.